My name is Jennifer. I'm 27 years old, and the story I'm going to tell happened in the living room of my house. It all started the day I decided to buy an antique watch at a thrift store. It was a unique piece, with a softly glowing brass pendulum and a dark wooden frame filled with delicate carvings. When I hung it on the living room wall, I felt something strange in the air, as if the temperature had dropped slightly. The first few nights, the ticking sound was comforting, almost hypnotic. But as the days went by, I began to notice something unsettling. The sound seemed to be getting louder, almost invasive, as if it was echoing directly into my thoughts. Sometimes, while reading or watching TV, I noticed that the minute hands made erratic movements, moving back and forth with no apparent logic. It all culminated in one specific night. I was sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when the clock suddenly stopped. The hands froze at 3:15. I stared at it, waiting for it to work again, but the silence in the room was interrupted by a dry cracking sound coming from the frame. I hesitated, but walked over to check. When I was a few centimeters away from the clock, I felt a cold wind rush past me, even though all the windows were closed. That's when I heard it. A low, hoarse, drawling voice, like a whisper coming directly from inside the clock. "It's not time yet." My heart raced. I backed away quickly, almost tripping, and ran into the bedroom. I locked the door and sat on the bed, trying to control my breathing, but the sound of the pendulum continued. He was no longer in the room. It was as if it were there, with me, pulsing inside my ear. The next morning, still terrified, I picked up the watch and took it back to the thrift store. The owner, an elderly man, looked at me with a look that mixed pity and something close to regret. Before I could ask anything, he said, "I shouldn't have taken it. He never stops keeping time." Since that day, I have never felt completely alone at home. At night, when everything is silent, I swear I can still hear the sound of a distant ticking, as if the clock is still there, waiting. My name is Alex. I'm 21 years old, and what happened to me was recently, but the impact still echoes in my mind. It was around 6 p.m. when my parents left to visit my grandmother. They left me at home because my younger brother was still in academia and had no careers. Without much to do, decided to play video games to pass the time. After about 30 minutes of playing, a loud noise coming from my room caught my attention. It was as if something had fallen to the ground. I paused the game and stood still, trying to catch any other sounds. A few seconds later, I heard the noise again, this time even louder, as if it wanted my attention. My heart raced. I started calling my brother, imagining that he had entered the house through the back door without me noticing. I called several times, but there was no answer. Decide to check. I tiptoed around, with a strange feeling that I was about to witness something out of the ordinary. When I opened the door to my room, everything was as I had left it. No fallen objects, no people. But something felt wrong, as if the air inside was heavier. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of a figure passing towards my brother's room. It was quick, but enough for me to make it freeze. I immediately thought he was intimidating me, perhaps hiding for fun. I decided to wait a few minutes before following him, but the discomfort didn't leave me. Finally, I walked towards his room, slowly, with my heart hammering in my chest. Opened the door carefully and turned on the light, hoping to find him hiding there. But the room was empty. Every detail was in place, impeccable. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize. Maybe I'm tired, I thought. After all, it was exam week at the prep school, and the stress was leaving me exhausted. I went back to the living room and threw myself on the couch. I grabbed the video game controller in an attempt to eliminate that discomfort. But before I could continue, I heard a sound that made me freeze. The bathroom door slammed shut. This time, there was no way to ignore it. I got up, irritated, believing that my brother was playing a trick on me. I went to the bathroom and saw that the door was actually closed. I hit it hard, shouting at him to open it, saying it was enough. But, to my surprise, I began to hear muffled laughter from the other side. It wasn't an ordinary laugh, it was low, sarcastic, almost mocking. My confidence gave way to fear. I kept knocking, insisting he open it, but the laughter only got louder. Suddenly, I heard the room door open. I rushed over, eager to lecture my brother. But, when I arrived, what I saw paralyzed me. It was him, calmly walking through the door, still with his gym bag on his back. My vision was shielded for a moment. My blood pressure dropped, and I almost couldn't breathe. He looked at me with concern, asked if I was okay. I tried to explain what had happened, but my voice was weak, broken. It felt like I had run miles. I finally managed to tell them what was happening. He said he missed that there was someone at home, someone who was playing with me. I talked about the noises in the room, the figure I saw, and, mainly, about the bathroom. He looked at me without understanding, but at that moment, the bathroom door slammed again. The sound echoed through the house like thunder, and we both ran towards it. But instead of silence, we heard the same low, disturbing laughter again, coming from inside. This time, she seemed taller, almost as if she was mocking us. My brother became clear, and I realized that he too was beginning to feel the same fear that had been consuming me since the beginning. After a few seconds, we heard the sound of the latch getting confused. The door began to open slowly, with a creak that seemed to last an eternity. As soon as we pushed open the door, we rushed in, ready to confront whoever or whatever was there. But the bathroom was empty. We looked around, trying to find some logical explanation. Nothing. The small bathroom window was locked, and there wasn't enough room for anyone to get through, not even a small child. The environment was cold, and the silence was almost unbearable. My brother, trying to remain calm, suggested that perhaps we had imagined things. But the question that hung in the air was impossible to ignore: who locked the bathroom from the inside? And where did that laugh come from? Since that night, nothing seemed to have happened. But sometimes when I'm home alone, I still think I hear sounds coming from the bathroom. I don't know if it's my imagination or something else. Whatever it was, that night has never left my mind, and I hope it never happens again. My name is Joao. I'm 25 years old, and what happened to me still gives me chills. I've always liked antique furniture, so I inherited a rocking chair that belonged to my great-grandmother. A robust piece, made of dark wood, with hand-carved details. I placed the chair in a corner of my room, next to the window. I thought it would be a good decoration and, perhaps, a comfortable place to relax. On the first night, something strange happened. I woke up to a low, almost imperceptible sound, a continuous creaking, like wood being forced. With the room dark, I lay there trying to identify the sound. I looked at the chair, which was in the shadows, but it seemed motionless. I thought it was just my imagination. I went back to sleep. The next night, the same sound returned. This time, it was unmistakable. The chair was rocking. I turned on the lamp and sat down on the bed, my heart racing. The chair was still, as always. Still, something felt out of place. I decided to ignore it and go back to sleep, but when I closed my eyes, I felt a presence. I don't know how to explain it, but it was as if someone was sitting there, watching me. Over the next few days, things started to get worse. When I entered my room after work, the chair was always in a different position. First, slightly away from the wall. Then, turned towards the door. But the climax happened one morning. I woke up in a cold sweat, with a feeling of heaviness in my chest. I looked directly at the chair, which was now facing me, next to my bed. The air felt thicker, almost impossible to breathe. It was then that I noticed a strange smell, lavender, the same perfume my great-grandmother used. But the intensity of the aroma was suffocating, as if the chair was soaked with it. Not knowing what to do, I decided to get up and take the chair out of the room. However, when I touched the wood, I felt something cold, almost like ice burning my skin. I quickly withdrew my hand, and the smell of lavender became unbearable. Desperate, I left the room and went to sleep on the sofa in the living room. The next day, I took courage and took the chair to the attic. As I dragged her along, I noticed something on the seat, a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. With shaking hands, I unfolded it and read the words written in ancient calligraphy, "Why have you forgotten me?" Since then, I haven't been able to get into the attic. Sometimes I hear the wood creaking from there, as if the chair is still being used. I don't know who or what is trying to contact me, but one thing is certain, that chair should never have moved from where it was. My name is Clara, I'm 32 years old, and what I'm going to tell you happened in the kitchen of my house, on a night I'll never forget. It was a Friday, late at night, and I was finishing washing the dishes. My kitchen is large, with a large window that looks out onto the backyard. I've never been one to pay much attention to that window, especially at night. But that night, something felt different. While washing a dish, I felt an uncomfortable sensation, as if I were being watched. I tried to ignore it, but my entire body felt like it was freezing. I took a deep breath, looked up and saw something that made me drop the plate in the sink. Outside the window, there was a figure. She was tall, thin, and standing there, motionless. He wore something like a hat that obscured his face. I blinked, and in the blink of an eye, the figure disappeared. Confused, I ran to the window, but there was no one in the yard. It was then that I saw marks on the glass, long vertical lines, as if fingers had slid there. I tried to convince myself it was tiredness or some shadow. I closed all the doors and windows in the house and went to my room. But that night, sleep didn't come. I couldn't forget that figure and, above all, the feeling that she was still out there. The next night, I was determined to ignore what had happened. However, while I was making tea in the kitchen, I heard something that made my heart race, light knocks on the window, as if someone was testing my patience. I was paralyzed, without the courage to look. The knocking stopped for a moment, but started again, this time louder. I took a deep breath, slowly turned towards the window and pulled the curtain. There was nothing. Not a shadow, not a sound. But as I approached the glass, I noticed that the same finger tracks were there again, only now they seemed to form something more disturbing, intersecting marks, as if someone was trying to write something. The following days were true torment. Whenever I entered the kitchen at night, I noticed that the utensils were out of place. Dishes that I was sure I had saved appeared in the sink, cutlery was scattered across the table, and some drawers that I always kept closed were open. I tried to explain to myself that maybe I was distracted, but each night brought something stranger. On the third night, I heard the knocking again, but now it was accompanied by a faint whisper, as if someone outside was speaking words that I couldn't understand. Terrified, I bought a thick curtain and covered the window. It gave me some sense of security, but the fear of being watched never completely went away. Whatever was out there seemed to be inside my mind. To this day, I avoid going into the kitchen at night. And when, for some reason, I'm forced to go, I feel like there's still something behind that curtain, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself again. My name is Eduardo, I'm 40 years old, and what happened to me was beyond what I could consider normal. I live in an old house, with a long hallway that connects the bedrooms to the living room. On the walls of the hallway, there are paintings of old landscapes that I inherited from my grandmother. I always found them intriguing but harmless. Until that night. It all started when, late in the afternoon, while I was in my room reading, I heard light footsteps in the hallway. It was as if someone was walking barefoot, shuffling softly across the wooden floor. I thought it was my wife, maybe going to get something from the kitchen, but when I called her, there was no answer. I got up to check, and the hallway was empty. However, something caught my attention. One of the paintings was crooked. I thought it was strange, as I knew everyone was lined up the day before, but I thought it could have just been the wind or movement in the old house. The following night, the footsteps returned, at the same time. They were methodical, slow, almost like a ritual. When I went out to investigate, I noticed that another painting was different. This time it was the dark woods, a painting I always found a little uncomfortable. The trees, previously motionless in the image, seemed to have gained a strange depth, as if the scene were alive. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself it was just tiredness. But things got worse. On the third night, I didn't just hear footsteps. I heard the sound of dry leaves being stepped on, as if someone was walking on them right there in the hallway. My body tensed, and a chill ran down my spine. When I finally found the courage to leave the room, I found the painting of the forest lying on the floor. The painting looked different, as if something had changed about it. The trees were denser, and, as I looked closer, I had the distinct impression that there was a shadow between them, something that hadn't been there before. It was enough for me. I took all the pictures off the wall that same night and stored them in the attic, trying to forget what had happened. But even without the paintings, the corridor was never the same again. The footsteps continue, especially on quieter nights. Sometimes I smell damp leaves and fresh earth, and I swear if I listen closely, I can hear the distant sound of trees rustling. Today, I avoid the hallway when it's dark. I walk past him quickly, without looking at the walls, always feeling like something is watching me from the shadows.